Hey guys, my name is Ryan. Today we are out in my garage in my shop and we're going to start working on a table that I'm making for my brother. It's going to be a round 5-foot diameter table made from cherry, and the lumber actually came from a tree that I helped take down at my sister's house not too far from where I live, and we milled it up, stacked it, dried it, and it is down to a moisture content level that I'm happy to start building with. And I just pulled it out of the barn the other day and we are good to start working. I will be splitting this build up into 2 videos just because it is a larger build and I didn't want these videos to get too long. But in this first section, I'm going to be beginning to glue up the tabletop. That's going to happen in a couple phases. And then I'm going to start working on the base as well. So the first step is to start cutting out my pieces for the tabletop. I'm going to cut these to just a rough dimension, a little bit longer than I need. And then I can bring them over to the planer. All right, so I got my first couple boards cut out here for the top. This probably isn't everything I need. It's hard to tell exactly, with the width and it being a circle table, how many boards I need. And I don't want to cut too many out to where I have a lot of offcuts when I start cutting the circle shape. So I'll start with these, glue a couple of them up. I'm gonna send them through my planer now. This is a 16-inch planer that I got. So yeah, let's get going. All right, so next up, I got to send this stuff through my joiner over here, and this will square up my edges so that I can send it through the table saw next to get a clean surface before I glue everything up. So I usually find the board and then I'll kind of find my straightest edge to send through the joiner first. So it makes it a little bit easier. Every board's different, and you just got to find what fits through there that is easiest. But yeah, let's do it. All right, so we got 2 faces planed down nice and clean, and one of the edges through the joiner. Next step is to head over to the table saw. We'll run the rough edge of these boards through, then it'll be a completely square board. All right, we are at the point where I think we're ready for at least the first glue up. I'm gonna do this in a couple stages just because it is a pretty big, wide table and these boards are pretty heavy. So I think I'm gonna start with this guy. This is the middle piece I'm gonna be using, and it's about 12.5 inches wide. The rest of these boards are like, I don't know, 8.5 inches. So I'm gonna start with this and then do 2 on either side and make that my first glue up. So when I'm gluing up boards, I usually clamp them together, find a straight edge of some sort, and mark my lines. And this is for cutting the mortises for the floating tenons, which I'll be using the Festool Domino for. So this is the Festool Domino XL. I've had this for a couple years now. It's really been a game changer for me in the shop. I've used it for a bunch of tables. I've used it a lot for table frames, and it helps a lot with just alignment and keeping everything flat and level. Um, I was hesitant at buying it at first just because it is pretty expensive, but I bit the bullet and glad I did a couple years ago. It's been great. But yeah, basically this just drills in a mortise into the wood, and then it we can hammer in a domino kind of floating tenon that sits in there, and that slides into both the joining pieces when you glue it up. Keeps the top flat, and just a really handy tool. All right, so we are ready for the first glue up of a couple glue ups. I am hammering in the dominoes now, spreading my glue out, and I always try to do this quick just because the glue does set up pretty fast. I'm using Titebond too, so it gives me a little bit more time than the standard Titebond 1 glue. So once the glue's on, I hammer in the dominoes into each piece and then clamp it up and hope it dries flat. I check it a couple times. I have to move the clamps around a few times as well just to get the top flat, but ended up working out nice. All right, so like I said, we're going to do this glue up in a couple stages. I think I kind of switched my procedure for this. I'm going to glue up the center section first, then the right side, the left side. So that'll just make it easier to get everything flat, level, and make these glue ups a little bit less stressful. But while we're waiting for the glue to dry, I am going to start working on the base for the table. It is a pretty simple pedestal base table with some knee bracing. We'll have some half lap joints to cut out, some cool curves for the feet, but pretty simple for a pedestal base. All right, so I got these boards milled up, ready to glue up. I'm just gluing them together to get the thickness that I need for the base of this table, and hopefully this goes well. Usually when I glue up pieces like this, I had issues with it wanting to slide around. I have heard that people throw some salt in there to give it a grit to where it's not going to slide around, so maybe I'll try that and see if that helps. Okay, I did that one. Did not use salt. I'll use salt on this next one and see if that helps at all. Just a pinch of salt. Okay, wow, I can already tell that salt works better. It didn't even move at all when I glued that up. So now that these are dry, I'm ready to start milling them up, which I start on the joiner here this time. Just getting one edge flat, and then I will bring it over to the table saw to rip it to the final width, which is about 6 inches. My table saw does not cut through 3 inches of depth, so I have to flip it over, cut it going 2 ways. But it's not too difficult. So now I'm planing it down to about the final 3 inches in thickness to get it to the correct size I need it for these half lap joints I'm going to do. And then the final step is just to cut it to length, which I believe was about 45 inches long. This is a 5 foot diameter table, and I wanted the legs to be as long as they could be without, sticking out past the top of the table. So now that these are ready to work, I am marking out where my half flap joints are going to be. It's pretty much just, you take the width of the boards and find the halfway point, mark them out, and I'm cutting at half of the depth of these boards, which is 1.5 inches. I have a dado stack on my table saw, or for my table saw, but it does not go high enough to cut this, so I just have to use my regular table saw blade, which, took a while, but ended up working fine. But yeah, like I said, I bring this thing over to the table saw, get it to the right height, 1.5 inches, and just start cutting. So once I cut this out on the table saw, I grab a chisel and clean up what is left over. There's not too much, and it doesn't need to be super clean, just getting enough material to where both boards will sit flat with each other. All right, moment of truth. Got these two cut out, and let's see if I can fit them together here. Oh yeah. It looks like everything's in there pretty good. A slight little hump here. Gaps aren't too bad, and I am happy with that. So before I glue this up, I am going to cut the curved profile out on each leg. So I'm making a template so that I can duplicate that evenly on each corner. And I just cut this template out, mark it with a pencil on each side, and then I'm just going to bring it to my bandsaw and cut it out. So everything's sanded down, and pretty happy with how it turned out. I'll probably have to fill this in with some epoxy, let it soak in there and harden everything up. I did tape my corners here just because there will be a lot of glue squeeze out, and it's going to be really hard to clean these corners up with sandpaper. I mean, I could use a chisel, but if I tape it, it'll keep the glue squeeze out at a minimum, and just easier to clean it all up. So yeah, these joints turned out pretty good. Got a little bit of cleanup to do, but I'm glad I put the tape. It saved a lot of sanding and kind of chiseling out that glue. Saved a lot of time in doing that. So. now I am going to be working on the actual post itself. I think there are 4 boards. I'm going to be cutting out of this one board that I will glue up to create the post. It's going to be about 6" by 6" post all together. So I had to glue quite a few of these together to get that dimension. But yeah, I chop all these up. I have to go through the milling process again and planing them down, which I didn't show that. But once I got them milled up, I put a whole bunch of glue on there and started putting everything together. I forgot to use salt here, which I should have done because these things were moving all over the place once I started clamping them down. But no worries, I was still able to get it together and it all worked out fine. But yeah, started putting clamps on here. It's a little tough to get everything pushed together. These boards, weren't perfectly flat out of the planer, so it's a little tough. But with big enough clamps, everything came together pretty nicely. All right, so the base, the pedestal portion of the base, it's dry. I am now able to start squaring this thing up and getting it flat and clean up the edges. They're still pretty rough. So I brought this over to my planer and realized that my planer depth only goes to about a little under 6.5 inches. So I had a little bit of material to take off, so I just took it to the table saw, cut one strip on one edge, and then I had to flip the board over and do the same thing. After I did this, there was still a little bit left over, so I had to get my handsaw and cut the remaining strip out. So here it is sitting on the base. I wanted to see how flat it was fitting. It did end up being really nice and square, so I'm happy with that. It's just, sitting here on its own. I'm gonna end up putting some lag screws through the bottom up into this post to secure it, and as well as there's gonna be knee bracing going between the post and the base at each corner there, so that'll add a lot of strength. Yeah, as far as the base goes, I got to build the second bracket that's going to sit on top of this pedestal post that the tabletop will sit on, but I am going to do that in next week's video, as well as continue working on the tabletop. We're going to cut the circle shape out of the top and maybe even start some of the finish work. So if you guys are interested in that and want to see more, make sure to subscribe so you're notified for when I put out these videos. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.